Hey, good morning. How are you? Making sure my audio is connected securely. Turns out I have a bad USB port, which is why I lost audio last time. If it slips a little bit, it just disconnects. It's not good. Not good. Does it sound okay right now? Because I'm a little nervous too about the sound quality. Alright, good, good, good. Moas in 5 minutes. Eh. Uh. It's not impossible, but it's it's kind of rough too. So I'm gonna try my best to explain what I think is going on from my point of view. Normal step down, then we moon. Uh, I don't know. This is a tough one because, and I'll try to clean this up a little bit. I know I've got all my little lines here. We pretty much are running this scenario in my mind until we're not, because what happened right before earnings, like the day before earnings, was that we pumped up and we had a divergent RSI, and we went over the top, and then we came back down, and we basically never closed above like that 5 level. So we kept pushing up and then failing to advance. And so you have two things that were going against us into earnings, right? So number one was the failure to advance. So you have weakening volume on the push up. It was not bad. When I say weakening, I'm not talking about like the quantity here. I am saying like how distribution typically works is that you get to a top and then you sell hard, and so there's usually like a spike in volume at the top. But when we were kind of climbing here, that breakout just didn't really look like that kind of smart money buy-in, the big institutional buy-in that you need to see when you're about to advance. So you've got a double top here. The first top makes a higher push on the RSI, so it gets more overbought. The second one on the same or slightly less volume, I would say, gets basically less overbought. And the reason why that's important is because divergences typically indicate that it's like it's asynchronous, right? It's not the amount of volume being pushed into a move is not the same. Okay, so like, it's not that this could never have run or won't run or anything like that. It's just that these two tops didn't look good. Okay, so that was like the first kind of big thing working against us. The second big thing was that we still have like a couple little gaps here and there. I think there was one around like the 410 or whatever. We may have gotten that one. I'm not sure. If that was all after hours, we didn't. But I know that a lot of that move happened the day after. It was like 18% or whatever down. And that can happen. But typically, like, if we're going to advance, so you're not going to lose this creek. And so the other argument that might be made, if y'all are into like Wyckoff and stuff, and my brain is still kind of waking up. So give me a minute to kind of get more clarity on this, right? We're just starting the stream. But typically, like, you have to make that backup in order to move forward anyways. And this is the first line that I drew, and I thought we were going to come back down to about 40. If I remember right, I think I said 408 or something like that. We didn't. I don't think we got 408. I think we got like 410 right on the dot or something, or 413 is what this says. Yeah. which is fine. I'm not like complaining. But what was weird is that we diverted. So like it was clearly just like a pump into earnings. Like that's what it looked like. So when it kind of caught here and then moved up, in order for this to have advanced, first of all, you don't want to have that divergent RSI, period, like ever. There are times where it can correct, and we're on a 4-hour time frame, is what I'm about to say. I say, but we're on 4-hour right now looking at it, which is a high time frame. If this were on like a 30-minute or maybe even an hour and below, and you have a divergent RSI, for example, that might correct on a higher time frame, meaning like it's not going to be the end all be all for the whole move. It might just be that, oh, it does that move, and then you go to the higher time frame and you notice there's no divergence, and it's all kind of relative, right? Depends on the situation. Definitely it's happened before where we've had divergence on lower time frames, hasn't really mattered, but this is a pretty high time frame, okay? And it's one that's frequently traded by longs. So I feel like it's not and swing traders alike, it's not one that I would ignore. The other thing that was kind of going against us here is we had so first of all, we had this kind of necessary backup to the creek, which I thought it was going to happen before earnings or on earnings. I was kind of hopeful we were going to go down into earnings. You can see my line here. I thought if we kind of continued down, we might get that reversal on earnings. Instead, we just did a pump up. We could not close above 5. We made the divergent RSI, and we also hit, and this is on extended hours, we hit the 180 4-hour EMA. So I'm on the 4-hour, 180 4-hour EMA. And so that would be like saying the 90 on the daily, okay? Previously, when you go back and you look at the moves here, you can see that like anytime we've kind of broken above the 4-hour 90 of recent days, we've had trouble. Like it's almost always been our sell-off level, you know? And that's not the case all the time. So if you go back across like the history of the stock, you can see that it's sometimes been very dicey. Like we've had a really long stint. I mean, it was like 8 to 10 months where the RSI really compressed. And this is where you have that Bollinger Band compression as well, and everyone was talking about that. And it's prepping for a huge move. And of course, wonderfully, we misread it. You know, I misread the move, was hoping it was going to go one way, it did not. It was really frustrating, and that's that, right? It's over. But during this time period, sort of the same deal. It's just a little different. Anytime you come above that 180, you can see back here in November, for example, that's where the sell-off kind of begins. Then again here and again up here. So all the distribution kind of happens above that level. And it's been fairly consistently that way for about a year now. Again, you can kind of go back and say, well, maybe it's different back here. And yeah, I mean, there's been different times, sure. Like the stock is not 100% the same all the time, but the last year is a pretty long time. So anytime we approach that 4-hour marker, I know in my brain that it's going to be a tough one to jump. It should be considered its own creek, because it is. A creek is not, we've talked about this before, a creek is not a trend in that it doesn't necessarily have to be straight. It's really an imaginary EMA line, if you want to call it that. That was the way it was kind of conceptualized, was that it was this resistance that you're meeting, and like where is that resistance found? And RSI kind of helps you to determine like, oh, whenever this is hitting the top and it's getting overbought, you're kind of hitting that imaginary line, right? So these indicators that we have now are really great at informing us about where that might be. And then you can look at different time frames and they would probably illustrate different trends or different creeks, right? These are just helpful tools that all kind of add up to give you the same thing. So you have a pretty huge amount of I would say, technical analysis working against you on this move. So what was required, and I should say what is required, but I will say what was required because we're talking about last week. What was required is that after that push down that you come back above and you really have to jump this line. I know it's kind of a big ask, but anytime that this happens on AMC, we don't run unless anytime you get these cat ears, right? We don't run on a backup like this, a deep backup like this, which, made a new low here. It made a new low in this upper range. We don't run unless it comes back above here and it holds. And that's just basically a huge change of character. And it's one that would need to happen pretty quickly. So does it look like that's about to happen? No. No, it doesn't. Now, there's a couple things I wanted to mention. So like number one is 5. We came back above 5 a few times last week. So that level I think has been checked. It was not left alone. We had some folks that were saying, oh, we're not going to be back to 5 till October or something. We came back up, we checked it. But at this point, because it's been tested and back tested and we did not advance, that's one that you should keep on your chart. So if you're doing technical analysis and you hadn't already had 5, then you definitely want that range right there on your chart because that's one that is going to be critical for breaking in the future. The failure to advance past 5 here was like what happened back up top when we failed to advance past that 1130 level. Very similar, right? Where you have this really strong resistance, okay? So all of that being said, is there any kind of a silver lining to this? Well, yeah. And I think there is a possibility here that we're not seeing like the complete picture, okay? Because when I look at stuff like the 4-hour, and I'm really looking at specific things, you know me, and I look at the creeks, and I look at the volume, and I look at the RSI, and that's kind of it for the most part. I look at the patterns. That could usually tell you enough. I think there's a very, very strong kind of counter narrative going on right now that is worth noting. So we've talked a little bit about the Russell, and before you tune me out, because it's not AMC, I know a lot of people just kind of click off. The Russell 2000, I've been talking about this for weeks, and what this represents to me. Oh, hey, Abe. Thanks. I guess. What this represents to me is it represents small caps taking their turn. And I'm kind of happy Stockfather jumped on it and looked at it, and he said that this looked like an SOS, and it looks like it's about to go, perhaps. And so here's an example of a backup on the RSI and the backup to a creek here that's not necessarily going to result in anything bad. But what this represents to me is small caps might be about to take their turn. And I mentioned this previously because the range here is huge. This is not a small move. If this can find its footing and break out here, this is a significant move for small caps. Now, this is a very expensive buy if you were going to try to buy this, like $2,000, a piece. But you could use something like IWM or whatever and still get the similar effect. The point is that this looked like it was primed for a breakout, and that tells me that smart money may soon roll some money back into smaller companies. And I had talked to another person separately who was talking to me about how the small businesses were really struggling because they were burdened with just debt. I mean, they had to deal with COVID in a very different way than big companies did. Everybody got hit by it, but smaller companies are going to take a lot longer to recover. And I think that we're kind of seeing how they've really been stagnant. Like, they haven't moved for over a year. I mean, it's been a long time. So, February to February. I mean, it's been, 2 years? That's 2022. So, a long time. Okay. So I'm not saying that this is going to be this thing that propels AMC up necessarily, but a lot of the quote unquote meme stocks and that kind of basket of stocks that people were following for a couple years, they're smaller companies. They're not huge companies. Some of them, yeah, they were huge companies on the verge of bankruptcy, you know. Others, smaller companies, right, that got really bloated in their price and then they've dropped and now they're kind of hitting bottom or they're going out of business. I mean, there's been winners and there's been losers, right? And AMC's a tough one. I mean, it's down 90 something percent, you know, from where a lot of analysts think it should be. And it's still going down, okay? My impression of earnings was mixed. So I'm going to give you my impression of the earnings because this obviously didn't happen or it hasn't happened yet. I'm going to give you my impression of earnings and I'm going to tell you what I think that could mean. So here's on the daily, you can see we crossed down. So it looks like we're kind of on weakness right now because we're underneath the moving average. And I had mentioned, again, this being a probable scenario because you could come back down and get to like 3 or something before you make a move. And I'm not going to talk about shrinking iterations, but yes, they're here. And yes, they could be really powerful, but I would have to go to high time frames, like weekly, to sort of see that. So here's what I think. From a technical standpoint, I kind of just laid it out for you. It doesn't look great, all right, to me. Not yet. And it is possible that changes, and I'll let you know if that changes. If I know quickly, I'll let you know. If I don't know and it changes, then sorry. You know, I work another job now, so sometimes it can be difficult. I'm not looking at the markets 24/7. I'm kind of trading longer positions and then trying my best to keep up with the Discord group for sure. This is your current like local downtrend right here. So you take the peak that happened Wednesday and then you take that drop. That's a big one. Those 2 points are probably going to be the most important. And then from there, that's kind of where you would want to jump over. So we might see some more sideways action before we do any kind of move here. But for now, this looks pretty much like a cat ear right in the middle. I mean, let's go to the 2 hour and you can see it. I want to give you my impressions of earnings, but I also want to make sure I'm getting the technical analysis taken care of. So yeah, again, here's this would be 90. This was the 90 on the 4 hour. Now it's the 180. But look at the 90 here on the 2 hour. I mean, this is a very, very tight compression. And then look at right where we broke down beneath it and we're rejecting. And it coincided with this trend, which I plopped up right before earnings. I don't know if you guys were watching any of those other streams or whatever I had, but I saw my charts on the group. This is one that you would watch for rejection, and we did. We already kind of popped up. So to me, right now, this looks like the little cat paw, right? And then you've got the double top extension, and we're going to see if it can pick up any strength. And if not, you can kind of just see where it's going to go. I mean, look at it. I don't feel like this is the most complicated chart ever. I mean, it's a pretty simple chart. It's possible that we could kind of scrape a bottom early here. 2 hour looks like it's already pretty low. So again, maybe we can come back down and scrape that bottom around 4. Maybe we can get it at the next level down, which I have it marked as 390. I'm trying to remember why 390 and not here, because there's a double bottom right there. I'm going to say 394. So somewhere between 394 and 408, if it can kind of find a bottom here. It's also like a double retest or triple retest on this trend, but I digress. I had mentioned there is a possibility of a little head and shoulder action. That's what it looks like to me. And then we will see where the bottom is. So that's my technical bit for now. I think that this is looking down, right? And in order for it to go up, you have to jump this creek, this trend right here, which is kind of far, and it could take a day or two. And then honestly, I think you got to get back above on 2 hours, since that's where we are now. I think you got to get back above these two EMAs. I think if you can get above those with some support, you're probably going to fly. That would be the most idyllic scenario. And so it would have to be something like this, where maybe you get like a really crazy terminal action here, and then you come back up, and then you break above these EMA lines, and you'd have to come all the way back above here. And this is where you would find right here, this is exactly where you would have to find the smart money buy-in. So I'm not showing you, when I draw stuff like this, I'm not showing you what will happen. I'm showing you this is what it would take for me to be convinced that this is going to be bullish. So if I'm looking at where would I buy, it's not here, like on the guess. It would be be way up here. Confirmation. There we go. Okay, that's my thought. I don't think this is a buy right here just because I drew a line on the chart. So please don't misunderstand that. All right, and even this looks super dramatic, but I would want it to be that way, and to have that confirmation, because I would want to see that heavy volume buy-in, you know. Now, some of you are going to be like, hey man, isn't there like this one time where you talked about this kind of backup thing, and we had this comparison that was going to this one particular one way back on the huge run up to June, and it has this push up and then it pulls back and does a little M cross. No one's thinking that, I know. But I think about those things all the time, because it's true. Like, there are situations just like this where we've seen the stock has actually done, a big turnaround. But it's so rare. Like, it's like 1% of the time, and it will happen one day. It always will, because the stock goes up, the stock goes down. So eventually, like, you're going to have this, in my opinion, you're going to have a more bullish AMC market, and it's going to do that stuff more often, and then it's just not again. It's not going to keep doing the same thing forever and ever. This is kind of interesting. Yeah, look at that line. Sorry, old chart, but kind of a good. It's hitting right where we are now. I'm trying to remember where this one comes from. Whatever. Don't get distracted, Booksy. Just focus on what you were going to focus on. All right. So a lot of times when we think about this kind of idyllic scenario, we're looking at either one of two areas, right? We're looking at this right here, or we're looking at this right here. Whoa, that was really bad. It doesn't actually draw where your mouse is, right? And both of those have that bottom M cross on them. So I'm just going to look at the bigger one. You could look at this too, because this is very similar to what we're experiencing also. We've experienced this twice now. You see that push up here, and then the second push up goes higher, and then it falls, and then you've got this hook action, and then it drops to a new low. That's really similar to what we're seeing here with the one push up, second push up, falls, tries to advance again. In this case, it did it really quickly, and then drops to a new low. That's the same thing that just happened also back in whenever it was, September through October, November. So yeah, totally feel like this is legit. I mean, and I would even look at this and say, yeah, I could see this whole thing right here being possibly used by the people who really like fractals, in the hopes that you're going to just hit that bottom and go. And I kind of have that. I mean, if you look at what I have, it's sort of like that. But let's talk about this zoom in here. I'm on the 2 hour. Let me check something really, really quick. Sorry. No, this is 4 hour. This is 2 hour. So okay, that's the 180. Yeah, all right. Yeah, pretty similar. Okay. It's the same deal. You're distributing up atop it. It's the same exact marks that we just looked at, pretty much. Right. So let's take a look. So this is a very different time because this was already advancing. It does have the 180 beneath it, so it has the support of the creek as opposed to the resistance of the creek. It's acting as support, and the buy-ins here are incredibly high compared to where we are now, relative to where we are now. Okay, but this is one in which I think a lot of people want to, and myself included, like I'd love to hang my hat on it because it would mean there's a big move incoming. I don't feel that this is the best I don't think it's the worst thing to study. I just don't think it's the best comparison. But I know a lot of folks are going to be looking at something like this saying, well, how does this reverse? And I mentioned it before. Remember how I said it has to cross this line right here? That's very purposeful because anytime we have these kind of advancements, and in this case, I think I would even argue it didn't actually break it, but it recaptures like the main trend, I guess is what I'm saying here. So it ends up coming back above and gets back above that trend. And that's what we would have to see going into this. There's also another really steep one, and I don't really want to draw that, but that goes like this way. And it recaptures it really, really high. The big thing on this sell-off was there was a heavy volume sell-off, then it drops down to like no volume, basically. And then the final sell-off is a confirmation check on pretty major creek cross. So that would be like us dropping here to check. This is very similar to what I already said. Dropping here perhaps suddenly to check this major creek cross and then advancing. Okay. That's my thought on a possible turnaround. But I'd still think most of my, or I'd say most of this setup, not my setup, most of this setup still has more of the distribution. I mean, it just does vibe to it. I'd be happy if it turns. So I'm waiting to see what happens, especially here. When it gets down to being almost oversold again on the 4 hour or 2 hour to 4 hour, I think it's going to be a good watch to see what happens. Because there is a pretty important cross that happened. You guys are like, you said you were going to talk about earnings. This jump that happened right here is a jump. So this is an M cross. So it did already check it once. It's going back to check it again. So it's coinciding with this bigger creek cross. So I think it's still a very important place. I just know that we've seen AMC kind of ride creeks down for quite a while to get to places they want to get to, the institutional traders before we move. So it could technically hold this, not break the creek, and still try to make an advancement back to new lows. And if it doesn't ever get there, then yeah, I mean, sure, that's a plus. But for now, this is top, still kind of distributive to me. All right. What do I think about earnings? I didn't want to go too crazy on this right away because I know that earnings is a very touchy subject for the AMC crowd. I'll say this about Adam Aaron. He does not know how to be quiet. And I do not say that lightly because I always think it's better to try to understand and as opposed to just trying to be understood. Like, seek first to understand and try to make the most of what you're given, all that kind of stuff. And I am very reluctant to judge anybody, and I don't want to. I know you guys are like, well, you called out. That's different, calling people out for their work as opposed to calling people out for maybe what could be perceived as a character flaw or just a tactical, error. I don't want to. I can't really criticize what Adam Aaron is doing work-wise. I think he's doing okay, and I know people will have great disagreements about that. But with his public relations, it is awful, 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 awful. And I'm now convinced that he doesn't know his right from his left when it comes to how to interact with shareholders. Because here's what I heard during the meeting, and I think you all heard it too. I heard what should have been presented as a Cinderella story. And I said this in the Discord group. I don't understand for the life of me. So I'm going to get in my rant mode now, okay? So brace yourselves. I don't understand for the life of me why they didn't present it that way. They presented facts very matter-of-factly, but they kept adding on. Every time they said something positive, they then turned around and said something negative. They had such good news in this report, and it wasn't even like you could sugarcoat it and say, oh, it was okay, it wasn't good news. No. Like, you could bring it down if you want to. It was good news. Year over year, your EBITDA, okay, which is earnings before interest and tax, which also includes immunization, right? That was better year over year, and it had been increasing, and they got a double beat on earnings in a quarter where you have a writer's strike, or actor's strike. Who knows, right? They're always striking in Hollywood. They're not getting paid enough. Yeah, sure. I get it. But I just cannot understand. This is ridiculous, y'all. Earnings per share was up 15 cents. I mean, I don't get why you have to shoot yourself in the foot. And of all the earnings, for him to pick on Twitter trolls and to try to slap back at that, this should not have been that earnings. Now, you might say, well, Booksy, just talk about the facts. Just talk about the facts. Because the facts is what matters and blah, 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 blah. Yes and no. We live in a world of glass houses, right? And everybody is looking to throw rocks. And if you give people that avenue to throw rocks, they're going to throw rocks. And what he did is he ridiculously just exposed his glass house to the world. He chose to spend some 10 to 15 minutes talking about Twitter conspiracies and trolls and all this stuff. First of all, when you give something like that lip service, it validates it quite a bit. Second of all, he's the CEO of a company, okay? If someone on Twitter accuses him of working in cohesion with shorts, he does not have to come back with some middle school essay, right? Which is what it sounded like, in order to respond. He does not have to do that. He doesn't. Maturity in his situation should be he's able to communicate effectively his decisions, his opinions, his feelings even, right? While considering the feelings of others and his shareholders. And he can do that without directly going and creating some essay that talks about why some of his more fanatical shareholder base is wrong. Okay? So everything that they said, and that's just like part one of what I'm upset about, but everything that they said is like they kept replying with like these antithetical, like, I just don't understand what they were doing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, you have, I'm sorry, I'm at a loss. I've never heard anything like this before. You have a company who was supposed to be have a big loser quarter. Like, oh, they got hit hard, they're going to lose out, they're not going to make the money they need to make. It's going to be down, down, down. The stock price has historically dropped low, like super low.
So what the stock price narrative is telling me is that institutions are pricing in how badly the company is supposed to be doing. That's what stock price is supposed to indicate. And before you say, no, man, good news makes the stock go up. No. Like, everything's priced in, which is how smart money plays it. So if smart money was expecting this to be bad for the most part, right, they're going to keep bringing it down. They're expecting things to not work out for AMC. They keep bringing the stock price down. When things are finally working out for AMC, they want the stock price to be already FOMOing because they want people to FOMO in so they can sell their shares. That's institutional trading 101, right? They want to sell when the money's hot, right? When money's flying in, okay? So what I'm saying is that, and you guys are like, wait, what? It's complicated, right? You have to look at what's the big grand scheme of things, yada, yada, yada. All right, you can go study Wyckoff theory. You don't have to believe it. I don't care, okay? I'm just saying that's what I think. When they presented a fact, they would say something like this. They would say, and I'm paraphrasing because I didn't write it down, but they would say, we beat expectations in the box office. And Taylor Swift was a huge part of that. But, and here it comes, right? But we're way behind where we need to be. We're still not where we need to be. Why do you even have to say that? Why? Why? Tell me why. Before you say, oh, it's honesty, it's transparency, it's trying not to sugarcoat it. Yeah, but he said that for 2 years. They've already said it. And then they said something like this. And this is a huge deal. Huge deal. It's like they just dropped a gold nugget in a pile of gravel and then covered it up with more gravel. This is what it sounded like to me. So the EBITDA went up year over year. It's like way higher than it was, apparently, right? They have said repeatedly that they need the box office to fully recover or to mostly recover back to pre-pandemic levels. Even after this, and I have nothing against anybody in my Discord group, but someone in my Discord group did come on and say, well, we need the box office to recover. That is not what they said. Were you guys listening to what they said? Because I was listening. I know some of you were listening very carefully. They literally threw it in there like it was nothing. That's what I'm saying. It was like throwing a gold nugget into a bunch of gravel, and then they dumped more gravel on it. They literally said, we don't need it to fully recover. I'm a petri dish for AMC bashers. If that were the case, why would I be here? There's no winning. I'm a key stone thrower. I would love to know when I've thrown stones at AMC. I would love to know that. I think you're just kind of talking because you want to talk. I'm throwing stones right now because I'm presenting them with an argument that they are not making any sense. Like, you're trying to like catch me in a lie or something. I don't really understand why you're doing that because again, there you go. Like we're just throwing stones at each other, right? You see how this works? So like you're now accusing me of throwing stones, which is throwing stones and yada, yada, yada. The point of a window is to see through the window. If you keep trying to find windows, you're just going to keep trying to see through everything. We're just going to sit here and argue in circles for like hours. Okay? I don't want to do that. There's a levied criticism that you can have where you're showing how you feel about something while considering others. And I said early on that I don't actually have that much to say that badly about Adam Aron in his financials. So before you say I'm throwing stones, maybe don't ignore that key fact, because I actually said that out loud 15 minutes ago. Okay, not even. Okay? So I'm not sitting here trying to create a petri dish of AMC bashers. I'm heavily invested in this company as well. But anytime anybody says anything about AMC, all right, it is going to be used and manipulated against that person at some point in the future. And I've had people come back and tell me that, well, you've been like you just said, you've been predicting price for years and it hasn't moved the way you thought it was going to move. So there, okay. That's, all right, what do you want me to do? Like, I could just stop. I mean, is that what you want to do? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. There's never any kind of a end to that cycle, right? But there's nothing wrong with looking at the financial analysis and the technical analysis of a company and then looking at what they did from a PR perspective and saying that you disagree with it. What you could say about me, Gil, is you could say, well, that's just your opinion, man. And I would say, yeah, it is, man. It's just my opinion. But I'm sorry. He said, because it wasn't just him. They said great things financially. They said garbage things every other second they could. They went from saying, we don't need the box office to fully recover. We now acknowledge that. They said, we made an insane amount of money with the Taylor Swift thing. They said, we beat expectations and all these other things. But then they also said, we have to raise cash. We have to do this. We have to do that. Because if we don't, we're going to go bankrupt. Or this or that. Like, you don't need to sugarcoat. You don't need to add the extra is what I'm trying to say. Marketing is different than the facts. And I'm talking about marketing. Do you understand? Because the facts were not AMC bashing. That's what I don't get. So if you're accusing me of bashing AMC, you're completely misunderstanding what I'm saying, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because that's not what I'm doing. I'm actually saying AMC had a Cinderella quarter. That's the way it should have been presented. All they had to say was, everybody thought we were going to beat. Wall Street thought we were going to lose this quarter. Everybody thought we were going to miss on revenue. Everybody thought we were going to miss on earnings per share. Because of our strategic implementation of a distribution deal with Taylor Swift, we defied expectations and we beat estimations. Despite the odds, because of an actor's strike, we still had a double beat in our earnings. We still had a great year, despite pandemic recovery. And they did say these things, but then they said, but you need to go back and rewatch the whole thing. No. Gil, every single time that he presented a positive fact, he immediately said, I mean almost every single time, he immediately said, but it's not enough. But we're not there yet. But we still have to deal with this. But we still have to deal with that. Go listen to it again. And yeah, the Twitter troll thing, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, dude. But you spend, Gil, if you spend 25% of an earnings call, listen to me. You spend 25% of an earnings call, one that is also a yearly report. Listen to this. I'm talking about marketing problems, guys. You spend that much time talking about Twitter, you dang right I'm going to focus on that. because you tore me away from the facts. That's my criticism. And if that's me levying and throwing, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, he has this glass house, right? He's giving us these stones. He's giving other people these stones. I can't defend him because I'm not his, first of all, I'm not his friend, okay? But second of all, like, I can't defend him against the response to that. There's no defense for it. This isn't a matter of him just deciding to talk to his buddy about it. This is a matter of him taking and hijacking an earnings call to address Twitter trolls. This is not precedented, y'all. Like, so I don't know what, Gil, I don't know what you're, well, don't attack Gil either. Don't attack Gil either, okay? So people that are in there like getting mad, just leave him alone, all right? Because he's just expressing his opinion. And if he thinks that that's what I'm doing, he's allowed to express that. I'm arguing against it because I'm trying to understand what he's saying and trying to present like why I think that's not really the case. Like, again, it's the window analogy. I like that one, right? You can look through a window to see what's on the other side, and that's kind of a way of understanding things. But we often get into this like apologetic mode where we're trying to like argue our points, and we just keep trying to poke holes and like look through this, look through that, look through this, look through that. Well, I think you're doing this. I think you're doing that. It's the pot calling the kettle black. Yeah, I know. And that goes on forever. I'm not going to do that, okay? I don't want to get into some kind of a logic and debate argument right now about the things that I'm saying. Because I think the things that I'm saying are real. Like, I think it stops there. You know what I mean? I think if I talk to Adam Aaron about this, and I can't do it, and his people about this, what would they say against me? Oh, you're just being critical. Okay. So is everybody else. Why did your stock price dump through the ceiling last time when you had double beat? I'm sorry. When you look at institutions and their relationship to the CEO, I can separate, yes. I'm telling you right now, I personally thought everything they presented on paper looked good. But for some reason, probably because he spent 25% of that earnings call ranting about Twitter, an earnings call, a company of 100-year-plus company's financial statement, he drove the whole call away from the positives. He just did. I did not hear from him what I felt to be, you could say neutral. You could say it was neutral because he was like positive and negative, right? And it makes it feel very flat. And that's kind of how I went away feeling, like flat. But then I thought about it and I was like, I should not have felt flat. I'm not saying they should have created FOMO, all right? What I am saying is there was no need from a public relations, from a shareholder relations, from any kind of financial relations, there was no need to pair everything they said with some kind of a negative. You just don't have to do it. It's already understood where the company stands. We've been hearing it for years. People that are long-term investors in this company understand the struggles that they've gone through and that the struggles that they're going to have to continue to go through. And maybe it's semantics, y'all, but semantics matter when you're in the public sphere. They just do. And if you're running a company that's over 100 years old and you've got a yearly earnings call and you've got thousands of people tuning in and you've got all of social media and you've got all of mainstream media and they're going to pick out the things that you say, they're going to look at all those things, and you're thinking that everybody's going to remain objective, oh, well, it does, we can address this and everyone will still see the facts. No, they won't. I'm sorry. They won't. So when I say glass houses, I'm not sitting here trying to throw stones. I'm saying that they're giving everybody stones. Like, and you can critique my critique and we can go on like that forever, but I'm not going to entertain that anymore. So I'm just saying that I'm not entertaining that argument anymore. Okay. I'm done with that. The whole, cause I think it's just a rabbit hole basically. You might hear me saying that I'm bashing AMC because I didn't like the earnings call. I got onto that earnings call expecting kind of a neutral to flat to bad earnings call. I know that a lot of folks were really bullish about it because of the Taylor Swift thing. I kind of expected it to be sort of meh because of the box office. But then the things that they presented to us felt like they were buried with negative sentiment. That's what I'm trying to say. And all you have to do, I know what it sounds like, you guys. You're probably thinking, Booksy, you're not a marketing guru. They know what they're doing. Well, if they know what they're doing, they did it wrong this time. They made a mistake because I don't feel good about that earnings call. I just don't. That's my opinion. But it just doesn't make sense to me. They should have been like, this was a Cinderella quarter. This was a Cinderella year. Everybody expected us to do bad. We came out with $100+ million because of the offerings. He did talk about the offerings because he said if we didn't have these, we would only have like 20 million in cash. And instead we have like 150, But that's good, right? Like we're padded with like almost, I don't know what it was. It was like 150, but I'm rounding, right? I think it wasn't exactly that. We have like 150 million in cash. You know what I mean? Our EBITDA is better than it's been in a long time. Again, like we're beating these Q4 expectations year over year. We're doing fine. I think the year over year wasn't the greatest. I think some of those went down, but like, I think the food and beverage was up again per patron. It was all way higher than it has been, but I think the overall, I could be wrong about that. There was one that was down because I remember thinking like, that's okay. But like, it should have been presented as a Cinderella story because instead of like, we're so grateful for Taylor Swift, we're so grateful for Beyonce. It's okay for you to say thank you and be very sincere about it. But they kept saying that like, if it were not for them, we would have drowned, basically. I'm like, okay, if I didn't have the life ring that was thrown to me, I would have drowned. So we can greatly appreciate whoever threw the life ring, but like, we grabbed the life ring in this case. And not only did we grab it, but we ran with it. We swam with it, right? And not only did we swim, but we swam like a triathlon. I mean, like, it's just, semantics are so important, and I just don't understand it. That's all. Maybe I am just levying a criticism against Adam Aaron personally now, and that's why I started this by saying I don't like to do that because I think it kind of boils into like this sort of judgmental zone where you're starting to look at a person and how they conduct themselves and this and that. It just seemed immature to me. I don't get it. He doesn't have to do that. If he wanted to do that, he could have done a video message very separately from earnings and just presented it to social media. He used the earnings platform to reply to allegations, mostly baseless allegations that he was corrupt and that other people in his organization are corrupt. I think there was sort of a Papa Daddy kind of vibe to it where he was like, I'm just trying to defend my company and defend my kids, defend my house. But I feel like that was not the place to do it. And it really hampered what should have been, in my opinion, like a really awesome story. Because look, I mean, I'm looking at it right here on the screen. this is not what we were expecting from a company that's supposedly going out of business, being shorted to its doom over the last 2 years. And the last couple earnings have been pretty fly, like really good. And I think that the story could have, it's not a spin even, it's telling the truth that they took the bull by the horns and they went with it. AMC's my daddy. He's my daddy. So it's not about, I've already said this before, and I'm going to say it one more time to y'all, because I get criticized both ways. Okay, so on one hand, someone will call me an AMC basher. On the other hand, they think that I'm too light, too lenient on on Adam Aaron. I don't actually think he's done that bad of a job. I'm being sincere when I say that I like the things that he's done with diversification and acquisitions, and I like what he's done with closing the bad theater chains, buying higher performing locations. Like the popcorn sales, the food and beverage sales are all up. He's doing things that he needs to do to try to help this industry recover and his company recover. There are things that he has done, individual things that he's done, including his propensity for dilution, right? There are things that he's done that I feel like he didn't explain very well. I think the creation of Ape was one that just was completely boggled. And I to this day will never understand how that was rolled out. I don't understand it. I don't think it was done right. The fact that people in my Discord were having calls to their brokers to try to explain things, and their brokers were giving them all different answers, doesn't make any sense to me. Like, there are definitely things that we could say are, yeah, that wasn't handled well, or that was not a good idea. But I'm actually not here to criticize Adam Aaron's performance as a CEO necessarily. Okay? Now, him taking a pay cut or whatever he was saying it was, because he talked around it for a minute, and I didn't really understand what he was saying, because he was saying, like, it's dependent on the growth of the company, but then he was saying, like, the percentage of increase or the percentage of the growth or something like that isn't going to change. It isn't going to increase. So he was basically saying that his salary is going to be flat, like some kind of a flat rate comparison to the performance. And I don't know. It didn't sound like a huge pay cut to me. It sounded like he was saying that he's not going to bloat the number, I guess. I don't know. It was like it's like if you have a math equation and you have like a variable that's changeable, and he said it's not changeable anymore. That's the way I understood it. Because he did say it would still be tied to the performance of the company, but he said it wouldn't, the percentage, I guess, that it's tied, I don't know how the math works for that exactly, wouldn't change, wouldn't increase or something like that. So in essence, yeah, he decided to dock his pay. It boils down to, what should a good CEO do? Japanese do that all the time, like almost all the time. If their company underperforms or has a bad whatever, you always see it. It goes right up the chain. It's considered the honorable thing to do is to, like, and we could talk about whether we agree with that or not agree with that. It's an Eastern versus Western, sentiment. But you see it all the time in like Eastern companies where like a CEO. You don't see it as much in Western companies. There's the occasional few, that are good companies, I think, with good CEOs that they understand that, like, yeah, the corporate heads should not be lining their pockets if the company is not doing as great. It seems like a given. So I'm happy he did that, and I think that, again, like his affirmation of Taylor Swift, Beyonce was good. I don't know, man. The CFO that talks, he's always fine. He's very, like, to the point, like, very factual based. He's got a cool, interesting voice, so he's always easy to listen to for me. The guy who came on in the very beginning, who they just introduced, and he kind of introduced other people. He was like the shareholder relations manager or something like that. I don't know. I kind of blamed him the most because I was like, dude, if he probably just didn't want to lose his job, but I was like, he should have vetted these speeches from Adam Aaron. He should have vetted it. Somebody should have looked at that and said, hey, Adam, I think there's a better way to say this so that it doesn't kind of damper the whole thing. I really just think it's a PR problem. And that's kind of what it boils down to me. Did I think that they had a good financial fourth quarter? Yes. Could it have been better if they had full box office returns? It would have been amazing. Yes. You got to imagine movies like Dune 2, if they had come out in the fourth quarter and made buco bucks. And we had other stuff. It wasn't like that was it. But it was like, if you had that and Taylor Swift, it would have blown stuff out of the water. Right? But the fact that they beat those expectations, I think, again, it should have just been represented as a Cinderella story. That's it. That's all I got to say. No, Gil, you're just kind of like, you're actually doing what you're accusing me of doing. You know, I'm not doing that. I'm telling you very simply, like, I liked a lot of the things they said. Here it is very simply. Okay, no fluff. I liked a lot of the things they said. He said a bunch of good things. The CFO said a bunch of good things. I don't like that they paired negative things with every good thing. I don't like that there was a big but, B-U-T, or however, right, behind every statement they made. And if I have to, I can go and pick apart piece by piece. But I think most people on here know what I'm talking about because they listen to it. They know what I'm talking about. This company doesn't need to continually repeat to its shareholders that they're not where they used to be. It's very simple. So do not accuse me of of seeing good things and saying they're bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they presented good things and then they just overshowered it with stupid stuff that they didn't need to say. Dude, I'm reading your comment, Gil. Please stop. I'm not arguing anymore. I literally looked up and it said, quote, Gil B, quote. So he said a bunch of good things, ... and you didn't like it, ... Okay, ... That's an accusatory statement. You're saying that's what I feel. That's not hard to understand. Dude, I think more of this from Gil. So why are you accusing me of accusing you? I don't understand. It sounds like you're just trying to pick a fight. I'm telling you exactly how I feel. So you can take what I'm saying and turn it into whatever you want, or you can just take what I'm saying. It sounds to me like you just don't like what I'm saying. I mean, that's kind of all there is to it. Like, at the end of the day, I think you just don't like that I have disagreements with the way they handle themselves. And we should just leave it at that. Because I'm not going to change my mind because you're, not happy with that. Oh my gosh. It seems that you have like this inability to understand both things I'm saying. Like you're still only hearing one thing, which is ironic because you're taking away all the negative. Why are you doing that, Gil? Why aren't you hearing the positive? Isn't that funny? Because he's kind of like illustrating my point. Like, people hear what they want to hear. And if you present them with a bunch of negative stuff mixed in with the positive stuff, it's very hard to come away with the positive stuff if you're waiting to hear that negative stuff or if you don't want to hear that negative stuff. That's exactly what Adam Aaron did. You're literally proving my point, Gil, right now. Like, you're actually doing what I'm telling you that happened during that meeting. Like, you're doing the exact same thing. It's hilarious to me. Thank you, Gil. Exhibit A, I guess. So what Gil's doing right now, if you're completely lost and you're like, man, I don't really like dealing with Twitter trolls or YouTube trolls or whatever. I don't think he's trolling. I think he's upset because he doesn't like what I'm saying. But I'm saying positive things about what I heard, and then I'm criticizing what was presented as a negative. So they would say something positive in the earnings, and then they would follow it up by something really negative. So what that does is it creates a sentiment of neutrality and or bearishness on what should have been a very celebrated quarter. That's it. Ironically, what Gil is doing is he's taking everything negative I'm saying or everything positive I'm saying and trying to turn it into a negative. And then he's taking all the negative statements and using that as his support for turning it into a negative. It's almost exactly like what I'm accusing AMC of doing, right? By taking all these good things and pairing negatives to them. So, again, thank you for illustrating the point. And he's so, like, convinced that he's right that he's literally, like, stuck there. Like, he can't see past what he's thinking and saying, like, at all. So, yeah, and he's saying that my argument's pointless, but it's not. I mean, PR is not pointless. It's just not. So, and he used, I didn't choose to do it. Adam Aaron chose to do it. I didn't choose for AMC. I would never have chosen for AMC to take 15 minutes to address Twitter stuff during an earnings call that's also an annual report. I just would not have done it. Yeah, he's missing the point. It's not an indictment, Gil. I don't know you. I don't know what you're going through. I have no idea what causes you to feel the way you feel. I'm not here to blanketly defend AMC. I'm not here to blanketly criticize them either. I think there's both good defense for AMC and good criticism of AMC, and I think that that's healthy. And I don't think that it's wrong for somebody to voice their opinion on that. And I'm sorry, but I don't like the way that they handled that earnings call, period. They took good information and they made it feel neutral or bad. They took the positives that were being said and they kind of squashed them with negatives. And that's what I was saying. Like, Gil was kind of doing the same thing in the chat to me, literally while I'm talking, which is kind of crazy. Like, I'm here affirming the positives, and he's like, so you don't like any of it? And I'm like, no, but it's kind of interesting that you say that, because that's how I felt about, in some ways, how they conducted that meeting. So earnings, overall, what did I think? I think less is more. I mean, if they can give us just the bare bones and present that and present it in a positive light, I don't feel that that's deceitful. I feel like that's being honest. Now you might say, hey man, if you're omitting something, omission can be deceitful, like just not saying something. Yeah, but they haven't not said something. Like that's the thing. Is like they have always said this, you know. They've been saying the same thing for 2 years. So there's nothing new under the sun here. Like they don't need to talk to us about how the box office hasn't fully recovered. What they did say was so cool and important and in good news, okay? I'm not sugarcoating it. It just got buried in there, which is them saying that yeah, man, this is a possible like big deal that we don't have to have box office recovery anymore. Our company is situated in a place now where we might not need that. We won't need that. That's a huge deal. That should have been like what was on our minds when that earning call ended. And instead, we got that 15-minute rant about Twitter junk. I mean, just silly. I'm sorry. And I get it. That's judgmental. I get it. It's like me throwing stones, right? I get it. I agree. But it's also true, I think, in this case. Will IWM give us a boost? Yeah, so I was talking about this earlier in the stream when I was talking about the technicals. I've been watching the Russell for, I don't know, maybe a month now. It's not that long, but about a month. Because small caps have not had their big day, there's no small caps have really recovered. And if you look at the ETFs, anyways, they've all been kind of flat for about 2 years. It's range bound. This looks like a really simple Wyckoff setup to me, and it looks like an SOS. And so if it does break out after having accumulated for 2 years, this should go to all-time highs, in my opinion. I think it's going to go up right up to here. Like, I really do. So that to me could mean a lot of things for AMC if it means that smart money is kind of rolling their investments now into smaller companies. The only problem with that is the interest rates. Interest rates are key, and there's going to be some pretty important announcements. Yeah, so interest rates have to have... Where did I put that chart? I don't know where it is. Interest rates have to have a... It doesn't matter. I think I just deleted it like 2 minutes ago. It needs to jump this creek or it's not going to recover. If it does jump it and it continues up, we might see something really good. And that was kind of like the rare scenario I was talking about. It would be great. But interest rates are going to have a really big impact. When they start slashing interest rates, I think that's when you're going to start seeing small caps do a little bit better. They're very debt laden. If you look at the analysis of like smaller companies, they didn't handle COVID the same way that larger companies did. And let's be honest, they don't typically get as many handouts when the government decides to bail out companies. They don't usually bail out the mom and pop shop down the street. They bail out huge corporations. There's reasons for that. Political reasons. There's also economical reasons. Obviously, mom and pop employ themselves, and maybe they're a few other employees, whereas a big corporation employs hundreds of thousands of people, which has a greater impact on the economy. But I feel like there's something to be said about the fact that it's been range bound for 2 years, and that's why I was addressing it repeatedly for a couple months, because I was like, it kind of looks like it's just doing a backup and it might jump, and it's starting to look a lot like what I drew here. I don't know about this pullback. It may not be necessary. The reason that I had that was because I was looking back over here and I thought 2020, and I mentioned that number a lot on the Discord group. I felt like 2020 was the support they needed, and I don't know if we've actually hit it. I think if we touch it, it should just fly. I think Gil's gone and or he's muted or something. So I don't know if we got that move yet. To me, it kind of looks like not quite, almost. The reason I'm not sure if we need it on the Russell is because this is like the midline right here. We're like hanging on it right now. So it might be more of a sort of a tap on that. So you may only get down to like 2060. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, y'all. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt going in whenever there's discussion, because it's just debate. It's just people's opinions, and everybody should have a right to express their opinions. He was kind of doing that circular argument stuff. That kind of grates, right? It gets pretty old pretty fast. Just sort of picking apart every word. I grew up with a lot of siblings. I'm very accustomed to arguing. It was like debate team in our house all the time. I usually got destroyed. So I'm like the worst. This to me looks like a really strong possibility of a huge break to the upside. I mean, this could end up going to like 3,000, but at least initially you'd be looking at 2,400. So the IWM question is really important, yes. And I do think that if IWM and small caps get that buy-in, I think that's partially what I've been hoping for, because it's relative, like it matters. It relates to AMC. Okay? And I think that it will have some kind of an impact on the price movement. Could be a big deal. Could be. I know that ChargePoint's one that I've kind of like danced around a little bit here. And gosh, man, SPY is just going. I wish I just held those calls I bought like way back here. I don't know. They would have like expired a long time ago, but still. So ChargePoint's one that I've been watching kind of closely. I know that it's not everybody's cup of tea to be interested in this kind of thing. And I know that some of y'all are going to be like, I don't really care about this stock, and you're going to want to tune out. But the nature of ChargePoint is one that's very similar to AMC in terms of technical analysis. From a technical standpoint, this chart looks really similar to what we see on AMC. It's not one-to-one, okay? But there's a lot of similarity in how we kind of approach this low here on ChargePoint, how the bottom has broken out from that low, and then ultimately there's some key differences that have to be addressed, like, for instance, earnings misses on ChargePoint's part, and then also that it's a different sector. It's not the same. It's not in the same sector. I mean, AMC's in like entertainment, you know. It's obviously not the same as ChargePoint, which is a EV manufacturer. They do charging stations, and they have a lot of different competition that AMC doesn't have, and vice versa. But this has hit historic lows this year. I don't think this is a company that's going to go bankrupt, but that's an opinion. It's a risky play still, because any company in that sector, there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers, y'all. Like, there just is. And when Tesla decided they were going to also start doing stuff like this, a lot of these EV people took a big hit. My thing is purely technical based. So I do think this is a company fundamentally that can get on their feet. I think all EV manufacturers have had kind of a hit the last year, but I also think that historically, like, this is at a low. There's a huge inflow of volume now into this stock, and there's a very strong chance based on where we are that we're either at or near lows, and ultimately, like, the highs are what I'm really concerned about with ChargePoint, and I think that it's primed to possibly get up to $5. Possibly even up to 10 within the next year. That's a pretty huge amount of increase. Obviously, you look at Wall Street estimations, they're going to be a little bit more varied. A lot of them were early on saying 10, more now saying between 3 and 5, but we're at 2. So for a stock that's this low to move that far, it's a decent move, and it's a good setup for it. So, to each his own. I'm not saying you should trade this, but I do think that this is a very decent setup. Okay, I can't promise that it's not going to make new lows. I mean, it's entirely possible this could come back down one more time and make a lower low here than what was previously found. I do not put that out of the question. What I do think is that it has broken out of its main downtrend, which is a very positive sign. I do think that it's had some pretty strong divergences in terms of RSI. There seems to be a nice turn that might be happening. And it's kind of primed, in my opinion, for a possible big turnaround. How long does it take? When does it happen? We're coming up on an earnings. I guess it's, tomorrow. I knew it was coming up soon. I haven't looked at it in like a week. I think this is one of those that if it can get above, I was looking at the 1 hour, but it's actually 4 hour right here. It's like sitting right on it. I think if it pushes over these prominent EMAs in this range here, it's probably going to have a pretty significant move to the upside, at least to like 250s. If it can hold above 250s, I think it's primed to go at least back up to the 3s. That's a significant move in my book. It's a very weird options chain, so I know you guys are going to want to look at AMC, so I'm going to go back to that in just a second. But it's a weird options chain, so if you do want to play charge point, shares are probably going to be a little bit less stressful because the options chain on charge point is very anemic until it moves. Once it moves, then it's a pretty strong move. You know what I mean? A lot of the calls will just bloat very quickly. So it's a very risk-on play. It's not one that everyone's going to want to participate in. So if you're interested in options, just be mindful that the interest and the volume for those options tends to be very light while the stock is underperforming. And then as soon as it starts going, call volume and call interest just skyrockets. So it's a very let's just say this, it will lose you money very quickly, but then it just kind of sits there. And it's mostly because the bid and the ask spread is so far away from each other. So you really have to kind of play the spread. You kind of have to wait until there's more interest. I'm not seeing anything on AMC right now, aside from this high volume, that makes me super excited. The volume looks good, but it also looks a little bit, again, just kind of like a back test on that main downtrend. If we're looking at this as a possible distribution point, it's pretty much just like a double bottom, right? Because this went to 413, this went to 413. I had a little diagram drawn up. I don't know why I deleted it. Now it's going to look like I'm cheating. I was saying if it was going to run, this is kind of what you have to see. And so we're only on part 1. You'd have to see it kind of do this jump here and then come all the way up to here. There's sort of 3 levels that I would watch locally. Yeah, one of them is going to be right there. That's going to be really critical. And that would be right around here. And oftentimes I'll draw stuff like this, and then what happens is that we end up being beneath it or something, and then it takes an extra week to get across them or something like that. So just because I draw it one way doesn't mean it has to happen like that. That's not true. But you do need to see this jump, and then you would need to see, it would probably be a pretty big backup, almost back down to 430, I would imagine. And that could take all day. Then tomorrow, if it happened, right? Tomorrow you maybe see the move up. No guarantees here about anything. So what we start with is we start with the most basic, which is we can go into like maybe 30 minutes. I wouldn't go much lower right now, just for your own sanity. Yeah, I did a pretty good job on that line. It looks right. It might be a little bit higher than where I've drawn it. It's okay. We'll just leave it. Yeah, so it needs to find support probably, let me think. I mean, honestly, it could come all the way back down to like 420. We could go back down to 425, and if we found support and pushed, I'd be bullish. But this also has the same vibe as like a very typical, like, I'm going to have to get closer so you can see it better. Yeah, it's a fairly typical setup here. So this looks like a hook on what I would call like a cat ear, right? You see the double peak, and then you've got what I call like a hook, which is a back test on the supply, really. So does that look bullish or bearish? Right now, it looks kind of bearish. You see how there's like this heavy volume bottom? That could be bullish, but then the buy-in is really light. So what you want to do is you want to watch and see what happens here. Because if you get a heavy volume top, it's more than likely that this was just some covering and then they're going to re-enter and then drop the price. If, on the other hand, you get a really low volume top, it could be that this was a decent buy-in here on this bottom, this heavy volume here, and you're basically, this would be like a, what they would call selling climax, in which case you should start seeing upside. A lot of it just depends on the reaction after the big reaction. Volume is just one thing. It's an indicator like anything else. And so by itself, it can be very misleading, just like any indicator. It just can. And I know that it's giving a lot of credit to institutions to say that they can somehow manipulate even things like volume, but they definitely can, like in my opinion. And they do. So I can use volume and say, yeah, I think this looks like it could be good. I could use volume and say, here's how it could turn bad. But then at the end of the day, I have to still be patient and wait for confirmation of that second buy-in. And definitely the creek jump. I think that's the big one. I mean, it looks like a typical M cross to me, so like to the downside. I know it sounds bad. So let's find the support here. Yeah, we're kind of right on it right now. The good news about this, if you guys want some good news, is that this is very shallow. So if this is a S curve, the remaining drop would be very, but I don't know, I say benign because it's not benign for anybody, but it would feel very weak compared to some. It may only go down. I don't know. This line's confusing me right here. I'm going to get rid of this one. Why did I have this? I think because this was like your creek local that you don't want to drop. All right, I can't get rid of that one. I could make this lighter. I need to clean it up for just a second. It's kind of losing my eyes. Well, let's make these guys lighter. They're kind of distracting. All right. And then this one is one of the parallels. It's kind of confusing that it's also orange. I'll just leave it for now. I don't know, man. This is pretty typical, like AMC stuff. If I didn't have any other lines on the chart, and I wanted one right now, if you're just wanting to track it today, I would probably pick this one, because like this one and then the lower one. If I only had two lines, I'm sorry, I would pick those two. This one and then this one, because that's your sine wave basically, and that's where you're gonna either make or break this move. So you're gonna reject and head low, or you're gonna find support and head high. And right now we're really struggling with that support part here, and we immediately broke down beneath that creek and made a low. So we just made a double bottom. We're retesting it. So there is a bit of a floor here. Not seeing much on the RSI to kind of use. It just seems like we're kind of coasting right along this orange parallel. I can see a lot of wrapping on there. So that has to do with, how do I explain this? Why do I even have that line? So like parallels could be thought of as trends, but I actually think that it's a little more nuanced than that. I believe this one is a shift, like an entire chart shift from a previous set of parallels. So like instead of being on, let's just say it's like A, B, C, instead of being up on A parallel, you're now down on B parallel kind of thing. And so it's like catching on the rungs of a ladder. And I think we caught a lower rung after that reverse split, and we've been kind of working our way down. So my hope with the parallels is that you leave them. Like, I don't want to stay inside of it, because it does, in my mind, create a bit of a channel down. So the channel down we have right now goes back quite a ways at this point, to where we first kind of started distributing way up here in December. And I see it as that's kind of the next one of the next major leaps in terms of this downward trend that we're in. It's kind of like on charge point, where you have this sort of secondary. You see this? There's like another trend here. You see the orange and the blue? They're basically parallels. It's a really similar concept where you're starting to adapt to a different, it's not just a range, it's like downward. And that will represent what becomes like the bigger creek. Because like whereas this has already jumped like a more minor creek, it has yet to jump what would be considered like the more prominent creek level, which is like here, which happens to coincide with the, in this case, it really coincides with the EMA. So this guy, does that make sense? So I see this parallel as kind of an indication of like where the creeks are now. And so on AMC, I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. We're wrapping our finger right around that parallel. So if you kind of think about it, like if this chart were sideways, it's not. But if this were shifted sideways and we didn't have so much downward pressure, where would that trading be taking place? And you can see right there that there's these kind of channel bound movements, right? And you can see we rejected off the last one above us way back in December, and then the only other thing we have is this large one. This is the rotational one that I was using. That's where I got the parallels from. And if you're wondering, like, where does that come from? They basically come back all the way back to the June run-up. They're the same parallels. It's just we're just lower on them. So I did a big chart that I shared with everybody a while back. I'll bring it up again so you can see what I'm talking about. Oh, you can see my tax return. You didn't get any information from all that. Don't worry about it. There you go. Y'all are like, oh no. Yeah, these parallels kind of heading down. See that? And they've been going down for a while. I don't know if they might be a little hard to see, but these 2 points that we hit define those parallels. So for the most part, they're the same now. There's some slightly different ones, but I think that iterations, often what they do is they look like they're shrinking, but they're really like bringing you to a larger set of coordinates, if you will. That makes sense. And I've talked about it like connecting flights, because you have to sort of get from A to B. So a lot of times you'll see like shrinking iteration, and what it's doing is it's getting you from that A to B point, and it's like a smaller version of a larger move, and it's basically just building up to that bigger move, because the algorithms are already trading the pattern. So you see it in the micro, and it ends up, like I said, I think of it, it's not the best analogy, but I'm just trying to present it like a connecting flight, where you have to get on the bigger plane at some point. That's kind of the way I see it. So So in the grand scheme of things, all right, when I look at this, I see this as a move possibly to the upside, that would then have to pass over these parallels, essentially. Okay? Yeah, I saw your comment, Ape. I do have a new Discord group, and as to the second part of your comment, yeah, I don't know. I don't really want to talk about it because nobody really. I don't know. I don't know any of y'all, and y'all don't really care about the facts. So I've kind of, that ship has sailed, and I just kind of let people think whatever they want to think. So. Yeah. It doesn't really affect me in my daily life at all. But, you know, maybe one day it'll all make sense to people, but it probably won't now. And I've talked about it a little bit, but I'm not going to get into that today. You know, I'll address what I need to address about it. But I'll say this, is that there's a lot of people who take something like small and then they make it into something that they want to make it into, and then there's other people who completely justifiably, I guess, want to get angry about stuff, and I get that too. Like, I understand, and it doesn't matter to them what the legality of it was or this or that. Yeah, they won't see it as anything but what they want to see it as. So, yeah. That's all. And you know, it's funny too, because like I'll talk to people about it. You know, I've talked to people about it quite a bit in my actual life. and everybody's super graceful and like understanding when I actually just talk about it, what happened, what didn't happen. But on the internet, like it's just never gonna be. Tess has been here for a long time. Yeah, on the internet, it's never gonna be anything but like one-sided. So, and I fully know why, and I don't feel like I need to argue about it. But yeah, I had people who like kind of weaponized it, turned it against me, and you know, things come back around. You know, if you don't do good things, sometimes you make mistakes or you mess up. People are going to use it against you. I'd rather surround myself with people who don't do that. You know what I mean? So the new Discord group, I'll send it out. If you do go in there and like cause problems, you'll just get kicked. You have to have accepted the and there's only about 120 some odd people in there, but you have to have accepted the welcome rules. And really, the welcome rules are just, hey, don't be awful. You know what I mean? And let's stick to stocks. And I've gotten criticized already for being like too vague about stuff, not just being open about it. Maybe one day, but I just don't feel like it's necessary. It mostly boils down to like a personal matter for me. So, and it's something I'll deal with, you know, now and the rest of my life, and that's that. But I know who I am. I know what I'm not. Sorry about that. Sorry to have not have any kind of reaction at all when people bring that kind of stuff out again. So I'm doing better with it. This to me is still like a fake out. I don't feel like this is running, but I'm trying to be optimistic for y'all, but I don't know. When I look at like the 30-minute here, for example, it just doesn't quite, it's like hitting this 50, it's like coming back up. It's like a big retest on this drop. So unless it can sort of overcome that and have a change of character, I still think this looks like it's presenting itself as a possible drop. Now, here's what I do think though. If you were waiting to see if there was confirmation, remember how I was saying like you would want it to jump this creek? Well, the same kind of applies for RSI in some ways. And this is probably the only time that I would suggest this is an early indicator and not like a lagging indicator is on divergences, but it's hit or miss because you're on a small time frame here. We're on 30 minutes. You could lose on that 30 minutes. Yeah, so this right here is a possible drop. And what I would look for on RSI is a higher return. Like, so if it does come down lower and the RSI is higher, that would be a pretty decent indication that we might be in a better spot. But it's not the end all be all. And ultimately, like, if we fail to make a new low, which you guys are like, that's not failure, that's success. What I mean is if there is a buy-in, you can look at RSI and see how much conviction there is sometimes. So if it does make a new high here, a higher low, you could look at RSI and see what's going on and see if there's any kind of divergence or any kind of upward momentum. But I have to be straightforward about these kind of things. I said it a minute ago, we're kind of hinging on this parallel. We're trapped beneath moving averages. We dropped beneath, in my opinion, early on, we dropped beneath that creek. So I'm seeing this as kind of a convergence of markers, and you can see that they're all intersecting oddly, perhaps. They're all kind of intersecting right in this little pocket here. So you're getting a sort of a cluster cuss of intersections right in this spot. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, a 4-way, 5-way if you count this, intersection of parts here. All in this like little spot. So if we were to run from here, I would say there's a whole lot of support that we just grabbed. If we were to drop from here, I think that that's not good. Like, you're losing a lot. So a drop from here would be pretty significant, and I would assume it would probably not happen today. Not fully anyways. I know we still have a lot of time left in the day, but I just have a feeling that this wouldn't drop until right there or close to it. Like, we would kind of chop low today, like this lower part, let's say from 426 down to 416. And then, because if you look back, we kind of jumped over this area. See that? We didn't back test it, and now we're coming back into it. This is now where you would want to see some kind of a trade happen. And you guys are like, what? That's so vague. What I mean is, like, if the desire is to like buy in advance, okay, and you're coming back down, you can see how this is like clearly trying to distribute back down through it. You can see the distribution tops 1, 2, 3. They're all 3 of them, 4 if you count the very top. They're all 3 of them directing towards this particular part, right? This particular area, this range. So anytime like you're trying to define a range, see if you can determine where that, not the support is, like that one particular line, but look at the range that the buying and selling is happening in. So this was previously a supply, and this tells you the story of the price moving quite a bit. So I'm going to try to do my best here. So you can see here, this acted as, oh, come on, brush. This brush tool drives me crazy. You can see here it acted as supply, a little bit as demand, and then again, supply, and then again, supply. And then when it did act as demand again, right in this pocket, it was kind of weak. Like, it didn't spend very much time there, kind of jumps over it. There's a 1, maybe 2, I would say, pullbacks to try to check that region. Very weak. And then this is one continuous draw back to that region. It's very similar in a lot of ways to what I had drawn coming back down to that pocket. And I thought that if we were going to take off, that's probably where we would do it from, was like right here. So that's why I'm still like in the middle about this. I do think this top is distributive. There's no question in my mind about that. It is not because it came down. I said that before earnings, that it didn't look good because of the divergence that we were having on RSI, and because it refused to close like above. It just refused. You have that classic like paw with the double up thrust after, which I call the cat ear. That all looked pretty clear to me. I think that right now that drive back down seems to be a drive back into this region. It's currently still acting as support, but my thought is that this is where we're going to either base or where we're going to see that kind of major turn happen. And if the major turn does happen, it would be a drop beneath this like 416 level. That's what I said earlier in the stream. It's just a different way of looking at the same thing. Basically, if it drops down from 416, you're going to be looking at probably 394. So those are things that I think are kind of difficult to ignore. And the fact that we have this massive, I would say, convergence of maybe creeks and parallels and trends is pretty significant, because if you lose here and you drop beneath them you have to eventually go back again over all of them. And that's very frustrating for us because we've been struggling, right? So for us to get above these would be very, very, very significant. Like this would be a hugely significant win for AMC if we were to push up here. I can't overstate that enough. I mean, like I just can't. It has to be yeah, I mean it's such a huge deal because of just the amount of I would say oppression that this stock has been dealing with for the past year. And it's probably why it's being like heavily guarded at the same time. Like it's a really weak, I don't know, this is almost like a weak effort still from bulls, but because you think of how much, like look at what happened last time we came up. It's almost the same. You know what I mean? Really similar. You see, this is where we're at now. We're at this kind of middle point where we're kind of grabbing on for dear life and hoping that we don't go down more. And if you start rejecting and heading down and you move away from, I mean, it's almost identical. You'll move away from that, you're going to have to get back over it. And this, as soon as we dropped beneath it back in November, this was November 8th, 2023, we never got over it again, right? Until here in February, which was months later. So we're at a much better place now. We're farther out. We're away from some of the earlier creeks that we don't need to deal with anymore, I guess. I mean, that's a good thing. But on the whole, like, it still looks really similar, you know? It's like grabbing on for dear life right now. It's really struggling. That's why I think if we can get over that hump there, I think it's going to be big. And I've talked about us going to 13, like I'm so sure it's going to happen, but there's just so much stuff here that's telling me that it would be very, I use the word stuff a lot, I know. There's many, many indications here that this would be a really good move if it can happen. But I'm telling y'all right now, if it continues to feel like the pressure here from sellers, I just don't see how we avoid going down and making like a new low here. At least back down to the previous bottom, 350. I foresee us going to this red mark. If we don't do it now, we'll do it way later. But what stinks about that move is then you still have to cross again, which is frustrating as all get out. Yeah, so yeah, here, let's do this so you can see what I'm talking about. It's not apples to oranges. I mean, there are things like I would look at and say, yeah, that's pretty different, this and that, but yeah, this is pretty different. Like we're definitely holding stronger this time. You can see that we're trading kind of at or above, not below. You see how this was already turning it back into a seller's range, and we're holding above it. I guess the danger is in that we could still be in this mode right here. We could be up higher because we're still kind of skirting around. We haven't had that big, I know 18% is a lot, but we really haven't had that huge drop. So, yeah. Should we be exciting the next 2 weeks? Or are you saying exiting? I'm not sure what you're saying. I think a big part of it is you got to watch for interest rates. I know in March, they said maybe March might get some news about that. Interest rates being cut or dropped. That's going to cause the market to have some pretty strong volatility. And then beyond that, I would just say watch your small cap stocks. I think the banks are always, volatile in some ways. with what's been going on with inflation or stagflation, it may not be as, cut and dry, but yeah, 409, that was kind of our one of our bigger numbers. I think I said 408, but whatever. Same thing. Exciting. Yeah. Everything can have an impact, but at the end of the day, like, there's no one thing that's going to cause AMC to move. So anything that's good is good, but you have to kind of take it all together. I'm just skeptical of certain stuff right now. I do think this looks like it could be a bottom, but I said the same thing over here, and it ended up losing support and dropping. So you can see, like, one of the major differences right now is that we're not quite below that support yet. So here, this is roughly where it was last time. And when we failed, you can almost look like a head and shoulder, right? When we failed, it just kind of sat there for half a second and then just started dropping. And this is when we got the dilution news. Well, I mean, that's good because is it Unhwa? I don't know how to pronounce your name, so I'm sorry if I got it wrong. But that would become like, that would be really similar to what I was thinking, which was end of March. But that's a big what if. And I don't think that it's impossible that we go down and make like a new low first. And that's what my major point this morning was, that this is a distributive top, period. But if it can hold here, you might have some pretty significant move back to the upside. It'd have to be presented as sort of a change of character is what it's called, where basically you see a weakness and then it returns back to strength and it kind of flips the script. And I don't think that happens until we get back above 5, like up here. It need to be at 5. I know it sounds like, well, why wouldn't you buy now? Well, it's not confirmed. Okay, good. Yeah, it sounded Korean to me, but I didn't know. I don't like guessing those kinds of things. And yet I did guess, didn't I? Yeah, so Unhwa, I think you've got a good chance of strong moves coming towards us at the end of March if the setup continues to play out. I don't think that it's a guarantee because, at least for now, I haven't really seen the quote-unquote smart money buy-in. And I know that sounds weird. Like, why would I want to trade with smart money? That's a lot of people don't like smart money, and I get it. But it's not like that. I'm thinking about large institutionals buying. I think they're buying long for AMC, but we often want to get in on that move. If you're just accumulating shares, this isn't like a bad place to be. $0.38 back in 97. I went over 10 in less than a year. Yeah. And we're kind of in that same boat, right? I mean, with reverse split priced in, this is really, really low. So moving from here up to even 45, where those giant gaps were first started, would be a significant move. Shoot, even here to like 20 would be significant, but yeah. So I don't know, man. The 30%, yeah, they've bought a lot. I went to this, man, what was the site called? I don't think it was Morningstar. It was like, I forget it. Maybe it was like Fintel or something, but I saw an article posted and I went to it and they had some interesting data points, and it was like 30% institutional ownership now, I think, which is quite high. Yeah. And there was a lot of buying that happened November to now. So I feel like AMC's a powder keg, but it's not quite shown me the confirmation yet, which is what I want. Yeah, kind of a mess, huh? Anyways, I digress. This looks a lot stronger than the last distributive setup did in terms of like a range. But it can't break below this. And if it does, it's just the same old, same old. So if you see it lose, strongly lose 416, it can go down to like 408 and then close above. You know, that's possible. So you definitely get like a quick gap fill and then come back above and close. But if it closes below here, and then I would say just even 1 or 2 days of closing beneath 416, you're going to be in bad shape. I think we're likely going to see the fulfillment of like what I would call like an S curve. And this is a rough estimation, but I would suggest to you that that probably would go down to at least initially like 370. So that puts us back in this lower pocket. And unfortunately, that puts us in a place where we would then be trading below what was support, which is at 394. Yeah. So no one thing, I don't think, we'll move it, but there's a lot of good pieces here. And I was being critical of the AMC earnings call earlier, mostly because I thought it was a PR nightmare, and that they used that platform to talk about stuff they didn't need to talk about. But also, they kind of covered all the good news that was in there with sort of a but or however or yeah, but really, you know. And I didn't like that. I think everybody's looking forward to a box office recovery. Everybody wants that to happen who's invested in AMC. It's a movie company. You want that to happen. But them saying that we didn't really need it to be cash flow positive and to have a strong foundation is a big deal. I mean, you're basically saying you're not reliant on Hollywood necessarily to get you through the hard times, and that's a big deal. Is it inoculates you, helps you to like avoid things where you've got a writer's strike or an actor's strike. You avoid having that kind of fear that, we're going to be way behind if something like that happens. And that, to me, was one of the biggest takeaways. Aside from just the math being good, they talked about EBITDA quite a bit, and that was nice. I was happy with that. They did not really talk about debt renegotiations. They didn't really talk about specific things with popcorn or credit card sales. They didn't talk about that. So it is what it is, I guess. I guess those were baked into the numbers. But I didn't hear anything explicitly said about those things. I was kind of hoping they were going to address it because they hadn't really talked about specifically how beneficial those things have been. I'm not really sure why they're waiting so long. I know they've mentioned it. Don't get me wrong. Like they've said stuff like that, but it's more like I want to know how important it is, and I just haven't really heard much about it. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing it. I'm not always watching the stock. I'm not always like reading the news, but I was hoping they were going to come out and say, here's what popcorn sales have profited us. Here's what credit card sales have profited us. Here's the profit margin for that. Here's how lucrative these are. You don't really get that. You're not getting like an itemization of the financials, which is fine, I guess, when you're doing a summary report. But it'd be nice to have more specifics. Yeah, it's hard to say. A lot of times we get the moves beforehand. Somebody always knows. That's the old adage. But there's an expectation, right? And then if the expectations are met, the plan goes forward. And if they're not met, then sometimes things go crazy. But this is a stock that has, over the last year, a lot of the institutional ownership has been buy-in because of lending out shares. And so while that has made people a ton of money, I think I talked about that previously, and there's a really staggering statistic. I think AMC was the number one for money lending, or for share lending in terms of making money, lending out to shorts. While that is a staggering figure and it's kind of scary to think about, there is this whole realization that, well, yeah, but they're buying those shares. You know what I mean? And there may be a time when that eventually comes full circle. You would expect that at some point. And these institutional buyers and sellers are very cyclical. They don't tend to buy and sell stuff weeks apart. They're doing it quarters apart, years apart. So long term, the buying of the shares is still the buying of the shares, even if they've been loaning them out, which is a pain. They're probably simultaneously like getting puts or whatever. All right. So what's the basic kind of takeaway today, if I had to give you one? I'm not bearish because I want to be. I'm bearish because I think that the chart has still presented itself to sellers as bearish, and so if sellers continue to jump on it and we don't get the buyers, it's probably going to go down. It's that simple. And this presents itself as a very bearish top to me, going into earnings to sell higher and then drive the price lower. And the S-curve here, again, kind of makes me think we're going to come back down to below where we want to be, which would be 394. And frankly, if we get down there, I don't see why we don't just trade sideways and then redistribute and head towards probably 3 by the time we get there. It would be like us having a big sideways action like we did here, down this trend, and then dropping suddenly to like $3. And that would be your big, in my opinion, I think that would be like the final sell. And then you'd have a slower buy-in, and that's that, right? So it doesn't have to look exactly the way I drew it. I don't really care about that. But that to me would be, in some ways, that would be like long-term, that would be just really bullish, because I think hitting this marker is super, super significant. I've talked about this a little bit recently. This is my big creek line from 2016 to now. This is the creek we jumped when we made our huge run. And if we go back and check it, then we should be able to have a pretty strong reaction. You know, I know that this isn't what people want to hear because they want to just say, well, go up, right? But you have to imagine, like, this is a micro chart right here, right? And this was an early creek jump, and then it sold off for a long time until it came back to that creek, and then it had a big turnaround, right? And this is kind of what I'm saying. Like, this is happening right now in the macro. Like, we're right there. We're right at that place where we've had this really long sell-off, right? And we're finally coming into a place where we are really, really close. Now, I could be a little off, and you could tell, like, man, if I'm a few pennies off, this whole thing could be whack. But, like, I could be like, oh, it already hit. You know what I mean? It's taken off. Because this was really close to it. I mean, we were 20 cents away. Super, super close. So I have to be cautious here because I know that that's so close that it's almost negligible. But I just can't do that in good conscience and say that we already hit it, because I just don't see that. I don't know. I just don't see it yet maybe I'm wrong, and months from now, the stock will be up and I'll still be worrying about this. And y'all will be like, dude, you were talking about worrying about that. You were so wrong. I know, but I can't draw the line any other way. You know, this is it. This was the way I drew it. I don't feel like there's a better way to draw it. It works perfectly. So I feel that there's a strong case for it. Yeah, in my opinion, these two markers, the one from the June 2nd and 3rd, that top, and then the one from way over here in August. No, it wasn't August. It was like July or something. But those two create those parallels, and if you mark it all the way back to the 2017, it was really like, it's confusing because it's late 2016. It's like the very beginning of 2017. This turn happens. So right there at that turn, that ends up being the major downtrend that we break out of when we come back and we retest it, when we had the big run up. And that to me is the most major creek cross. And we're coming back down and checking that level right now. Like, we're right there. I don't see another one. So it is frustrating because you're like, man, I don't know, man. It's like super close. What if you're wrong and you're off by like a little bit? Does that mean that couldn't we already have hit it? Sure. I think this was an effort to kind of drive the price to it. And I know the RSI is as oversold as it's ever been. I mean, I think on the daily or 4 hour, it's more oversold than it was in 2020. I mean, it's like way low. But at this point, it's like, man, we're right there. So if we go down and just touch it, I feel like we're gonna fly. It's gonna be like this kind of a situation. And maybe not this dramatic, but you get the idea. That's how I feel about it on a macro level. Being that close to it, I almost don't care. So I know that me saying that, oh, it could go down to 3 sounds horrible, but I don't foresee it going anywhere else. Like after that, I've said it in the past that if it takes longer to get there, you could see something like 250, because if it takes a lot longer to get there, let's say we run up and the shorts really wanted to just distribute, and you see this like highly volatile distribution here, probably up near 13 or so. Could be less, I guess, depends, but that's where I would see it happening. You could still see it come down and get that marker, and it would be lower, the next time it comes down. So that's my opinion about the longer term price action, is that we're really, really close to this marker, and I just want to hit it. Like, I don't think that there's anything left beneath it. And I think if we were to break beneath it, it would be horrific. And I just don't see it happening right now with the way everything has happened and set up. It feels like it's right there. So we're at this point of convergence. You have the possibility of a near-term drop. If it can hit 4 and recover really quickly, you might just get that gap fill and go. If it cannot, then I think you're going to have, and it could be deceitful, y'all. Like, this could still run up to like 477 and then break down again. I mean, I'm being sincere because we didn't get a really definite hit on this trend. So it could look like it's going to go. That's why I'm saying, like, it'd have to be above this to get that confirmation. And if it doesn't, you could still come down, but then that would be like kind of the end all be all, maybe sell off. I don't know. I'm very hopeful about that. I'm not particularly as hopeful about the immediate move to the upside. To me, that would require a lot of volume and a lot of really definitive back tests on support, like everything kind of getting checked off all the way up back to 5. And that's where that main buy-in would probably be. My big thing is not comparing it to something like ChargePoint or whatever. I know I made that comparison earlier, and ChargePoint's struggling right now to get over its 4-hour 180. You just can't do it. It's starting to look like almost like a head and shoulders setup on the RSI. It looks weak. Like it's going to try to take that nosedive back down, probably to lows. But it's more about the Russell, which I'm using it as a sort of a barometer for. I'm using it as a barometer for potential. I know. Health. I know. Thank you. This is a good way of understanding whether or not we might see a bigger move in the smaller caps. IWM is another way of looking at it if you want to look at IWM. Both would be valid, in my opinion, and may have pretty significant run-ups in the near term. So, makes sense, and that would definitely impact AMC. So if AMC can manage to hold this level of support, maybe it gets the drop to 4, maybe not. But if it can hold this level of support, I think it's possible that we get that bigger run up. As long as we get over 476 and then up above 5 here, then you'd see a pretty gnarly move. Otherwise, losing the support around 416, any kind of rejection underneath here probably leads you down to lows. Now you might say, man, I think it could do that, but it's not going to get to new lows. And I would just tell you that it's, at that point, you're going to have to just watch it. I can't predict every little thing, clearly, that happens on the stock market. And I'm thinking in this point that the RSI is pretty oversold already. So the one saving grace we would have from a sudden drop to 4 is that we might get really oversold really fast. And that's what I'm thinking. It's possible get that drop and run. I guess I've just gotten to this point where I'm sort of not expecting good things. So I can be pleasantly surprised if we get that turn. So here's one that's already working in our favor. So on the 1 hour, it's not rejecting here on RSI. I mentioned briefly that you could watch that volume pickup and see what happens, because this is such a critical point. You've got a lot of convergence here. I would not put all my money on that. Oh, it has to be here, there, whatever. The point is like there's a lot going on right in this little pocket. So a pushover is a pushover if it has some strength to it, and I wouldn't question it. But I was saying, I think we were on like the 15-minute or something. I was saying like locally, you need it to jump this and hold support. This is just the local trend up. after this double bottom, and then it has to jump over like local creeks. I would say the 90 moving average right now on the 30-minute looks like the local creek to me. So that's the one I'd be watching here. See if it can jump. Everything else is going to send this thing down from where we are because it has a pretty significant downtrend that we're going to have to break. Yeah. Well, in WA, that's exactly what we usually see. It's kind of like it's sort of pricing in like bigger stuff later so that they can sell into FOMO. That's usually what happens. I mean, that's what happened into June, you know. There's always kind of a push ahead of the news, typically. So if we do think that the news is going to be good in the summer months, the push might be in the spring months, that kind of thing. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Not to rain on his parade or anything, but I've said it before, like, not the cool program. Oh, sorry, I was listening to Stockfather. He said, I told you about the Russell, not the cool program. Well, I'm not going to compete with him. He's got a nice Wyckoff chart on the Discord right now for it. P&F says at least 220. Jeez. 220 for AMC? Or for what? IWM. I'm not sure what he's talking about. I don't know what IWM's price is right now, so I'm not sure if he's referring to that. I haven't looked at it. I'm going to get beat up if it's... Yeah, all right. So, yeah, he's probably talking about IWM. It's 200 right now. That makes sense to me. At least 220? That seems like low, but... I think it's going to go beyond that. I think it'll go up high. It's pretty much the same chart as the Russell. So, anyways, I mean, it is the same chart as the Russell. I don't know why I said pretty much. I don't know. I think I'm just getting tired. All right, I've given you all my 2 cents about the earnings call. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of debate in that section of the live. I talked a little bit about technicals up front. I talked about long-term technicals where I think we might need to go, short-term technicals where I think we're setting up to go. The idea of going to 3 may sound crazy to a lot of people, and it may be one of those things where we've already gotten low enough. You know, and I've said this stuff before. Like, I remember when I said I thought we were going to go to 250 and then 350, and we only ever hit like 360, I think, in like extended hours, and that ended up being kind of the low move for a long time, for like 10 months. I mean, for like 6 months or something. It wasn't 10 months. So, just because I say something doesn't mean it's going to happen. We all know that. And just because I have that target in mind doesn't mean that I'm the one that can confirm it. I may not be able to confirm it. I've learned enough from AMC to know that sometimes if it's close enough, it's close enough. And other times it's been so it's just not, you're never really sure. I'm sorry, you just aren't with AMC. Sometimes it's like, boom, it hits it right on the dot. Other times, it doesn't seem to matter. And I know that goes across the market, but AMC is particularly notorious for misleading with direction. So if I'm seeing 3 and shorts are seeing 3, who knows? You know, that might be the plan to like throw people off. So you really have to be careful. That's why I like the idea of confirmation and rejection as opposed to just predicting where it's going to be in X amount of time. Because here, it's pretty easy to do. There's no reason why anybody who has any... You don't have to have any real strong technical ability at all to see that if it breaks below here and rejects, you're going to go down. If it holds here, you should go up. That makes sense? All right. Good deal. Watch your small cap stocks for sure, IWM and such. And I think that's going to be a big one. To see them rally would be a huge deal, I think, for the market. I don't think it guarantees AMC is going to move, but I think it could be really, really helpful. And then for AMC, kind of just sitting right on the... We're sitting right on the nose of what could be a big pivot point here to up or down. So it's unfortunately, we're not really in a strong yes or no position. I already told you guys earlier, the top here, distributive top, but this looks better because we're getting higher volume bottoms on these drops. And then we're also not quite losing the creek, which is good. Like that was this guy right here. So the fact that we're over it is positive. I just really be careful here and watch that level. That's all. All right. And ultimately, I don't believe that there's a lot of confirmation until we pass over 5, which may frustrate some people, but that's how I feel about it. I think this would be the strong buy-in confirmation. Okay? All right. With that, I'm going to head out. I got some other stuff to do today. Appreciate y'all tuning in, and I will talk to you later.